My name is Maribel, and I am 78 years old. The last thing I ever expected to see was the face of my own daughter, Trina, twisted in cold decision as she pushed me into the Black Rock River. The metal bridge railing was freezing. It was late October, and the wind in this part of rural Oregon smelled like snow. We were on an old, rusty service bridge. She'd told me we were going for a scenic drive to talk. The talk had been the same argument we'd had for 6 months, ever since my son-in-law, Oswin, had his brilliant investment idea fail. They were deep in debt, and I was sitting on what they called a gold mine, my small retirement bungalow and my late husband's pension. Trina wanted me to sell everything, sign over the pension, and move into the Sunset Meadows assisted living facility. I had visited that place. It smelled like bleach and sadness. I refused. She stopped the car on the bridge, claiming she felt sick. I, foolishly, followed her. "Mom, just look at the water," she'd said. "You just don't get it, do you?" she whispered, right behind my ear. "We have no choice." I turned to look at her, confused by her tone. That's when I saw the look in her eyes. It wasn't anger. It was a complete, terrifying emptiness. Before I could even take a breath, her hands were on my back. It wasn't a shove, it was a firm, calculated push. My feet left the ground, and for one horrible second, I was airborne, the gray sky spinning. I was too stunned to scream. My own child. The baby I had rocked to sleep had just thrown me off a bridge to die. The impact with the water was a violent, icy slap that knocked the air from my lungs. The cold was shocking, a physical pain that seemed to stop my heart. My heavy wool coat instantly became an anchor, dragging me down. I thrashed, but panic flooded my mind. I was sinking fast into the blackness. My lungs were on fire. My last thought was of Trina, standing up there, probably already walking back to the car, practicing the story she would tell the police about the tragic accident. As my vision began to tunnel, my body tumbling lifelessly with the current, my hand hit something solid on the riverbed. It wasn't a rock. It was sharp-edged. Metal. My fingers, acting on some final, desperate instinct, clawed at the silt and closed around a handle. I was blacking out, the pressure building behind my eyes. But I held on. Even as the darkness took me, I felt the object in my grip. It was a small, heavy box. And as my last spark of consciousness faded, I felt an engraving on the lid, a familiar shape that shouldn't have been there. It was the family crest from my late husband's signet ring. The first thing I felt was warm, dry fire on my skin. The first thing I smelled was wood smoke. I tried to open my eyes, but my lids felt glued shut. I was on a cot, wrapped in a thick wool blanket. I coughed, a painful bark. A shadow moved in the corner. "You're lucky the river spat you out," a rough voice growled. "Most folks it keeps." A tall, thin man with a long gray beard stepped into the light of a small stove. He looked like a man who had stepped out of the woods and forgotten to go back. "I'm Lowell. Drink." He handed me a tin cup of broth. "You've been out for 2 days." I tried to sit up, but a jolt of pain shot through my ribs. "Easy," he said. "You're bruised, not broken." I drank the broth. My memory rushed back, the bridge, Trina's empty eyes, the fall, the cold, the box. "The box," I whispered, my voice a rasp. "I had a box." Lowell nodded, pointing to a corner. "This thing?" There it was. The small, metal case, covered in mud. He'd found me washed into a snag of driftwood a mile downstream, my hand still locked around the handle. "You were more dead than alive," he said, stoking the fire. "The box was weighing you down. You're lucky I found you." I stared at the man. This hermit, this river rat, had saved my life. "Why?" I asked. "Why help me?" Lowell turned and looked at me, his gaze softening. "Because I recognized the crest on that box. He pointed a long finger at the engraving. That was Jareth's. My husband, I whispered. Lowell nodded. Jareth Croft. He was a friend. A long time ago. We served together. I was stunned. My late husband, Jareth, had been a quiet accountant. He'd never mentioned a man like Lowell. He'd never mentioned serving in any war. My daughter had tried to murder me. My husband, dead for 10 years, had secrets. Lowell, I said, my voice shaking. I think my daughter. I think Trina tried to kill me. Lowell just stared into the fire, his face grim. I know, he said quietly. I saw her car drive off that bridge. Fast. He looked back at me, his eyes hard. And I'll tell you something else, Maribel. Jareth wasn't the simple man you thought he was. You need to see what's in that box. My fingers were stiff, but Lowell handed me a pry bar. The box was old, and the clasp was rusted shut. Jareth never served in a war, I said. He kept the books for the old lumber mill. Lowell grunted. A man can be two things at once. He saved my life overseas. When we got back, we made a pact. With a sick, metallic screech, the lid popped open. The inside was lined with oilcloth, and most of the contents were miraculously dry. It wasn't gold. It was paper. On top was a thick, leather-bound journal. Beneath it were rolled-up documents, brittle with age, and a single, heavy brass key. I picked up the journal. His handwriting. My dearest Maribel, it read. If you are reading this, I am gone. And worse, someone has forced your hand. This box is my insurance. I read on, my blood turning to ice. Jareth, my quiet accountant, had been a secret investor. For 40 years, while working at the mill, he had been quietly buying worthless land. He bought swamps. He bought rocky hillsides. He bought the useless, tangled woods all along the Black Rock River. The very river that was supposed to be my grave. I unrolled the deeds. There were dozens of them. He owned nearly 500 acres. He owned the land under the very bridge Trina pushed me from. My mind raced. Why would Trina and Oswin want me dead for my tiny bungalow? Unless... They don't know about this, I whispered. They just want my house. Lowell shook his head. Maybe not. He pointed to the last entry in the journal, dated the week before Jareth died of his heart attack. I read the shaky handwriting aloud. Oswin Vance. The boy is a shark. He's been sniffing around. He knows something is coming. He asked about the water rights. I told him to get lost. My heart stopped. Oswin. My son-in-law. It wasn't about my pension at all. They were after Jareth's land. They just thought I was the only thing in their way. Oh, God, I whispered. They killed Jareth, too. Didn't they? Lowell was quiet for a long time. His heart attack was sudden. He looked at the key in my hand. That key doesn't go to a door. Jareth told me it opened a box at the old bank in town. A safety deposit box. He said it held the real will. They didn't just try to kill her, they may have killed her husband, too. While I was fighting for my life in a hermit's cabin, my daughter was putting on the performance of hers. Lowell, it turned out, had a small, battery-powered radio. 2 days after my accident, the search was officially called off. The cold water, the fast current. The sheriff said. At her age, there's no chance of survival. I listened, my stomach churning, as the radio host praised my grieving daughter and son-in-law. Trina and Oswin Vance are asking for privacy during this unimaginable time, the host said. They are holding a memorial service at the community church this Friday. I looked at Lowell. They're not even waiting a week. They're in a hurry to have me declared dead. We saw it all through Lowell's binoculars from the hills above the town. The funeral was small. Trina was there, dressed in black, a veil over her face, clinging to Oswin's arm. She was weeping, dabbing her eyes. She looked so broken. So believable. Oswin was the picture of strength, greeting people, his face a mask of solemn grief. But I saw him. I saw him check his watch. This wasn't a funeral, it was a business meeting. They were parasites, feeding on a tragedy they had created. After the service, I watched them drive back to my house. Later that evening, Lowell went into town for supplies. He walked past my bungalow. The lights were on. There was laughter. He said he saw them through the window, toasting with wine. They had a stack of official-looking papers spread out on my dining room table. They were celebrating. I sat in Lowell's dark cabin, the journal in my lap, and I felt a new kind of cold. The river had been cold, but this was the cold of absolute betrayal. My daughter was laughing in my house while I was presumed dead. She had erased me. They're filing for an emergency probate, I told Lowell. They'll use my accidental death to get control of the estate. And they'll sell that land. Lowell nodded, adding another log to the fire. Then you'd better get warm, Maribel, he said. Because you've got a busy week. You need to be strong enough to walk into that bank. They are celebrating her death. But she is coming back. I couldn't just get up and walk. The river had done its damage. My ribs were a constant, aching fire. Just getting from the cot to the door of Lowell's cabin was a marathon. I would collapse, frustrated. I can't. I'd yell. I'm just an old woman. Look at me. They're counting on that, Lowell would say, his voice calm, hauling me back to my feet. They're counting on you being a weak old woman. Are you going to prove them right? He was a hard teacher. He made me walk in the cold creek water to bring down the swelling. He made me eat bitter herbs and rich stew that he said would put iron in the blood. We fell into a routine. In the mornings, I would read Jareth's journal, absorbing his secrets. I learned about his time with Lowell. They were part of a ghost unit. That's where Jareth learned to see value where others saw nothing. In the afternoons, I trained. Lowell had me walking the perimeter of his camp, first with a crutch, then a walking stick. You're preparing for battle, he'd say. When you walk into that bank, you can't look like a victim. The pain was immense, but the betrayal was a greater fuel. The image of Trina weeping at my fake funeral burned in my mind. 1 week after my death, I was able to walk a full mile without stopping. The frail old woman Trina had pushed off a bridge was gone. The river had washed her away. In her place was someone else. Someone harder. It's time, I said to Lowell. He'd gone to town again and brought back a newspaper. There it was. A small notice from the county court. Petition to settle the estate of Maribel Croft. The hearing was set. In 3 days. They're moving to have me declared dead, I said. We have to get to that bank. Lowell handed me a bundle. I went to the thrift store in the next county over. It was a set of clothes. Clean, anonymous. You can't go looking like you, he said. You're a ghost. And ghosts have work to do. She's back on her feet and ready for a fight. The old town bank hadn't been a bank in 20 years. It was now the County Historical Society, a dusty place run by a volunteer named Calla, who was even older than me. Lowell drove me into town in his battered old truck. I'll wait, he said. I pulled the hat low over my face and walked in. The old marble floor clicked under my shoes. Calla was at the front desk. Can I help you, dear? She asked. I'm here to see the vault, I said. My grandfather left a family memento. Oh, that's lovely. The vault is just for display, of course, she said, shuffling over and pulling back a velvet rope. Go ahead. Just don't touch anything. The massive steel door was propped open. I stepped inside. The air was cold and still. The wall was covered in hundreds of small, brass-plated boxes. I clutched the key from Jareth's case. Calla was watching me from the door. Such history in here, she said. I needed her to leave. It's beautiful, I said. Do you happen to have a brochure on the bank's history? I'd love to take one home. Oh, of course, she said, delighted. I'll be right back. The moment her footsteps faded, I moved. I scanned the numbers. 112, 114. There. Box 117. My hand was shaking so badly I could barely fit the key in the lock. It slid home with a heavy, satisfying click. I pulled the box open. It was not a large box, but it was full. Right on top was a thick envelope, sealed with wax, bearing Jareth's signature, the last will and testament of Jareth Croft. Beneath it were stock certificates and a small, hardbound book with a single word on the cover, Ledger. I didn't have time to read it. I grabbed everything, stuffing the will and the ledger into my coat. I shut the metal box, relocked it, and slipped the key back into my pocket. I was smoothing my coat when Calla returned. I hope you found what you were looking for, she said. I looked her right in the eye. More, I said, than you could possibly imagine. She has the real will. I didn't wait. I had Lowell park the truck on a deserted logging road, the engine idling. With shaking hands, I broke the wax seal on the will. The language was dense, but the meaning was clear. My blood ran cold, then hot with fury. Jareth's simple will, the one Trina and Oswin had on file, the one that left me the house, was a fake. A decoy. This was the real one. He left the bungalow and a modest stipend to me, for my life. But the land, all 500 acres of it, was not left to me. It was not left to Trina. It was placed into an ironclad environmental trust, the Black Rock River Preserve. Oswin and Trina could never build on it. They could never sell it. It was to be kept forever wild in Jareth's name. And then I read the clause that made my head spin. The trust was to be managed by a sole executor with full control over its assets. And that executor was me. But what assets? I asked Lowell, confused. It's just land. How do I pay the taxes? Lowell pointed to the other book I'd pulled from the box. The ledger. I opened it. It was a list of numbers, dates, and account codes. This isn't a lumber mill ledger, I whispered. No, Lowell said. Jareth was a very, very good investor. That's an offshore account. In the Cayman Islands. I looked at the final balance at the bottom of the page. My hand flew to my mouth. Lowell, is this $9 million? Lowell just nodded. Jareth didn't trust banks. And he didn't trust his family. He wanted the land protected. That money is the teeth. It's meant to fight off developers like your son-in-law. It all hit me at once. The betrayal. The murder. The lies. And the brilliant, secret-keeping man I had been married to. Jareth had seen this coming. He'd left me a weapon. Trina hadn't just pushed a frail old woman into the river. She had pushed the one person who controlled a multi-million-dollar trust. I closed the will. Lowell, I said, my voice no longer shaking. What day is that probate hearing? Tomorrow. 10 a.m. I nodded, folding the papers. Good. Then they'll have all the investors and lawyers in one room. It saves me the trouble of hunting them down. She's not just alive, she's rich. And she's angry. The next morning, Lowell drove me to the county courthouse. He was wearing a clean tweed jacket. "Are you ready for this?" he asked me at the door. I looked at my reflection in the glass. I was wearing the thrift store clothes, my hair pulled back. "I am." We walked in. The probate court was a small room. And it was full. Oswin and Trina were at the front table with a slick-looking lawyer. Trina was in black, dabbing at her eyes. In the back row sat three men in expensive suits, the investors. The judge called the room to order. "We are here to hear the petition to settle the estate of Maribel Croft, presumed deceased." I stood in the back, in the shadows, Lowell at my side. "Mr. Vance," the judge said to Oswin's lawyer. "You are requesting an expedited ruling?" "Yes, Your Honor," the lawyer said. "My clients are devastated, but Mrs. Croft's estate has an urgent development deal pending. We simply wish to honor her legacy by selling her land before her body is even cold?" I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the room like a blade. Every head turned. Trina's head snapped up. Her eyes met mine. The handkerchief fell from her hand. Her face went from pale to white to a sickening, ghostly gray. She didn't scream. She just made a small, choking sound. Oswin's jaw dropped. He looked like he'd been struck by lightning. "Mom?" Trina whispered, her voice trembling. I walked forward, Lowell behind me. I pushed open the small wooden gate and stood at the petitioner's table, right across from my daughter. I looked at her, then at Oswin. His fake grief was gone, replaced by a mask of pure, reptilian panic. "I believe," I said to the judge, "there has been a terrible mistake." Just then, the main door opened, and a man in a $1,000 suit walked in. "My apologies, Your Honor," he said. "I am Jareth Kane, and I represent Mrs. Maribel Croft. And we are here to contest this petition." Trina let out a wail. Oswin stared at me, his face slick with sweat. He was looking at a ghost. And he knew, in that instant, that he was ruined. The look on their faces. "This is impossible." Oswin sputtered, finding his voice. He pointed a shaking finger at me. It's a trick. She's dead." The sheriff said so. The judge banged her gavel. "Silence, Mr. Vance." "Ma'am," she said to me, "you are Maribel Croft?" "I am, Your Honor," I said. On October 27th, my daughter, Trina Vance, and my son-in-law, Oswin Vance, drove me to the Black Rock Bridge. When I refused to sell my home, my daughter, pushed me into the river. The room exploded. Trina shrieked, "No. No, I didn't, she's lying." The investors were yelling at Oswin. "Order! Order! Mrs. Croft, that is an extremely serious allegation." "It is," my new lawyer, Mr. Kane, said, stepping forward. "And we have a witness. Mr. Lowell Hedges, who not only saw my client in the river but saw Mrs. Vance's car speeding away from the bridge." Oswin's lawyer was pale. "We also have the real will," Mr. Kane said, pulling the document from his briefcase. He handed it to the judge. "The will my clients filed is a forgery. This is the true and final testament of Jareth Croft." He explained it all. The trust. The land. The executor. The investors' faces turned purple with rage. "You told us the land was clear," one of them shouted at Oswin. The judge read the will, her eyes widening. She looked up at Oswin. "Mr. Vance, not only is this petition dismissed, but I am ordering an immediate investigation into fraud and, given the testimony, attempted murder." Trina finally broke. She slid from her chair to the floor, sobbing hysterically. "It was him," she screamed, pointing at Oswin. "It was all his idea. He made me. He said it was the only way. Oswin lunged for her, his face a mask of hate. You weak-willed idiot, he snarled, before Lowell stepped between them, blocking him with one solid arm. Two sheriff's deputies, who had been standing in the back, moved forward. They put handcuffs on Oswin. Then, they helped a wailing, incoherent Trina to her feet and cuffed her, too. As they led her past me, she looked at me, her face a ruin of tears. Mommy, she whispered. I'm sorry. I just looked at her. I felt nothing. Not pity. Not rage. Just empty. The river gives back what it's owed, Trina, I said. And I watched them take my only child away. Justice is served. The trials were quick. Faced with my testimony, Lowell's, and the mountain of financial fraud Mr. Kane uncovered, Oswin took a plea. He got 20 years for fraud and conspiracy to commit murder. Trina, in her desperation, turned state's witness against him. Her testimony was a pathetic, weeping confession. For her cooperation, she was convicted of aggravated assault and fraud, and sentenced to 7 years. I sold my bungalow. I couldn't live there anymore. The memory of them toasting my death in my dining room was too much. I moved into a small, clean apartment in town. But I wasn't just Maribel, the old lady. I was now Mrs. Croft, the head of the Black Rock River Preserve. My first act as executor was to use the trust's money to buy the Sunset Meadows assisted living facility. I didn't shut it down. I fixed it. I hired new staff, paid them a living wage, threw out the bleach, and put a garden in the back. I made it the kind of place I would have been willing to live in. A place with dignity. I saw Lowell often. He refused my offers of money, but he did accept a new truck and a lifetime consulting fee as the preserve's official warden. He still lives in his cabin, but his traps are gone. He just watches the woods. Today was the first annual meeting of the preserve's board. I'd invited the mayor and the head of the state's environmental agency. I sat at the head of the long, polished table. I was wearing a sharp, blue suit. I was 78 years old, but I felt like I was just starting. My daughter had thrown me in the river to get rid of me. But what we found underwater, what Jareth had left for me, it changed everything. The river didn't take my life. It gave me a new one. It washed away the weak old woman I thought I was and left the woman I was always meant to be. I raised my water glass. To the future, I said. And to the things we managed to keep. Maribel got her ultimate empowerment. If you loved this story of survival and justice, like and subscribe. What kind of story should we tell next? Let me know in the comments.